The night presses down like a weight, hot and suffocating. Smoke coils upward from burning copal, stinging your eyes, clinging to your throat, filling your lungs with a sweetness that turns bitter the longer you breathe. Around you, the jungle pulses with life, cicadas shriek in waves, frogs croak in low, guttural tones, and somewhere, deep and unseen, the rasp of a jaguar cuts through the darkness like the growl of a waiting god. The pyramid towers before you, a mountain of stone carved by human hands, its steps slick with humidity and shadow. Torches sputter along its face, their flames bending in the night air, casting wild, distorted figures against the walls, figures that seem alive, writhing, twisting, as if mocking the mortals below. The sound rises, a chant, low and endless, hundreds of voices merging into one. It is not music. It is not prayer. It is something heavier. You do not merely hear it. You feel it. The vibration gnaws at your bones, steals your breath, and leaves you with the certainty that you are standing at the edge of something immense, something that should not be seen. They bring him forward then, a youth draped in white, his face painted with lime, his eyes wide not with terror but with something else, something unnervingly close to rapture. He moves slowly, as if he has already left his body, as if every step is guided not by flesh but by a hand that cannot be seen. The priests flank him, their bodies shrouded in jaguar skins, their heads crowned with the feathers of sacred birds. They do not touch him. They do not need to. He knows his path. The crowd sways as he climbs the steps, torches flaring, shadows leaping. You find yourself holding your breath, waiting for someone to scream, for someone to cry out and stop what you know is about to happen. But there is no protest. Only the thunder of drums, the hiss of rattles, the roar of 1,000 hearts beating in unison. At the summit, the priest lifts something into the firelight. It gleams, wet and cruel. A stingray spine, serrated, jagged, made holy by the promise of pain. The youth accepts it with trembling hands. His chest heaves, his shoulders tighten. The chanting grows until it is no longer sound but a living force, pressing against your skull. And then, he drives the spine into himself. A sharp gasp breaks from your throat, but the crowd does not flinch. The boy threads the spine through again, and again, until a rope studded with thorns follows, dragging through flesh. Blood pours freely, soaking the bark paper at his feet. The priest gathers it, feeds it to the fire. Smoke bursts upward in thick plumes, carrying his life, his essence, into the heavens. His cry is not agony. It is exultation. His body shudders not with despair, but with triumph. And as the flames roar higher, as the chanting swells into a frenzy, you realize this is not punishment. This is worship. This is creation. This is what holds their world together. You thought the Maya were serene astronomers, master builders, philosophers of time. And they were. But here, beneath the choking smoke and the blood-soaked stone, another truth reveals itself. A truth darker, heavier, more terrifying than the ruins you admire today. Tonight, on Grim Histories, you step into their most horrifying secrets. The Maya did not see creation as a single miracle completed long ago. To them, the universe was fragile, a delicate cycle in constant need of renewal. They believed the gods themselves had opened the world with their own bodies, bleeding their essence into the void to ignite the sun, the rains, and the crops that sustained humanity. In their sacred stories, the divine did not give life with words or commands, but with sacrifice. Blood was not simply fluid. Semen was not merely seed. Both were the very essence of existence, the living fuel of the cosmos. To spill them was to feed the machinery of the universe. To withhold them was to risk its collapse. And so, every man, every woman, every ruler understood that their bodies were not private vessels. They were altars. Every organ, every vein, every drop of fluid carried cosmic significance. To walk in the world was to walk as a participant in creation itself. And when the time came, when the priests were summoned, flesh and blood were expected to flow, not in secret, not in shame, but in public devotion. And this belief led to practices that defy modern comprehension. If you've watched this far and haven't subscribed to Grim Histories yet, you're basically turning your back on history itself. Don't be the person who ignores the lessons of the past. Hit subscribe. The rituals began with the men, for men were the vessels of mankind's seed, the carriers of creation's fire. Among nobles and kings, there was no higher honor than to wound the most sacred part of their bodies. On temple tops, before the eyes of their people, they pressed stingray spines into their flesh, dragging rope studded with obsidian thorns through their genitals until blood poured in sheets. Bark paper was placed beneath them, soaking up every drop, and once saturated, the paper was burned. The smoke rose into the heavens, curling like a ghostly column toward the stars. To the Maya, this was no mere fire. It was a lifeline. Their blood became breath for the gods, nourishment for the sky itself. The carvings at Yaxchilan show kings pulling thorned ropes through their tongues, through their skin, leaving trails of blood that stained the stones beneath them. At Bonampak, murals still carry the colors of crimson sacrifice, the painted reminder of what was demanded from rulers. These images are not exaggerations or warnings. They are records, proud declarations carved into eternity to show that a ruler had paid the debt of existence with his own flesh. The genitals were not seen as a place of shame, as later cultures might insist. They were cosmic instruments, tools through which men could repay the gods for the gift of life. To spill blood from the source of creation was the ultimate offering, the most powerful gesture a man could make. In those moments, kings were not men but conduits, their bodies dissolving into the divine. It was pain, yes, but pain transformed into transcendence. To the Maya, agony was not destruction. It was a doorway. And through that doorway, the balance of the universe was maintained. Where men gave of their seed, women gave of their bloodline. Their sacrifice was not drawn from the organs of creation, but from the organ of speech, the very tongue that shaped prophecy and bound dynasties with sacred words. Imagine the queen kneeling in a chamber heavy with torchlight, the air choking with incense, the crowd hushed as she took the thorn-studded rope into her hands. The rope glitters with the barbs of the sacred SA tree, each point promising agony. With steady resolve, she drives it through her tongue, and then slowly, impossibly, pulls the length through her mouth, each thorn tearing fresh wounds, each movement releasing more of her blood onto bark paper laid before her. This was no private ordeal. It was a theater of power. The queen's suffering was proof of her divine authority. It was a public declaration that her body bore the weight of ancestors, that her blood carried the line of gods. One of the most haunting records of this ritual is carved into stone at Yaxchilan. Lady Zook, wife of King Shield Jaguar, is shown in eternal torment, blood dripping as she performs this very act. In the rising smoke of the burning blood-soaked paper, she sees the vision serpent, a colossal being opening its jaws to reveal the spirit of an ancestor. From that gaping mouth, wisdom flowed. Prophecies of war, omens for agriculture, guidance that would shape the fate of an entire kingdom. Her sacrifice was not symbolic alone. It was functional. Without the queen's agony, the gods would not speak, the ancestors would not answer, the dynasty would not stand. For women, sacrifice was inseparable from prophecy. Blood was not just life, it was lineage, a tangible thread tying them to the gods. To bleed was to renew the legitimacy of rule itself. You're watching Grim Histories right now. If you can stomach this level of detail and still haven't subscribed, then what exactly are you waiting for? Let us know in the comments why you'd ignore history staring you in the face. Even in the intimacy of sex, the Mayas saw no escape from cosmic law. Desire was bound not to passion, but to calculation. The sacred 260-day calendar dictated when a man and woman might join, for conception was a matter of cosmic timing. Priests consulted the stars to mark auspicious days, selecting the nights when energies aligned, when a child conceived could be destined for greatness rather than cursed by ill omen. In these moments, the bedchamber became a temple, the act of union not an indulgence of flesh but a contract with the heavens. The temples themselves whispered of this sacred order. At Uxmal, phallic columns and carvings testified that intercourse was not private pleasure, but a public covenant. Ritual sex, it is thought, took place under priestly direction, sanctifying fertility and ensuring the fecundity of both the land and its people. The act was transformed into worship, flesh harnessed to guarantee that the maize would rise, that the cycle of creation would not falter. Yet for all their reverence, boundaries were drawn in blood. Adultery was not seen as a private failing, but as a cosmic rupture, a tear in the sacred fabric of existence. An unfaithful man could be placed beneath a stone and crushed, his skull shattered in atonement. A woman caught in betrayal might meet her end in strangulation, her death restoring the balance she had broken. In the Maya world, no sin was solitary. Every misstep carried the weight of collective consequence. Even the question of same-sex desire was enmeshed in this dangerous calculus. Spanish chroniclers, aghast and eager to vilify, wrote of male brothels, of boys sold into sin. But their words drip with the venom of conquest and bias. The Maya's own art is murkier, figurines and carvings hinting at acts that might be read as intimacy, or myth, or taboo. To them, the line between purity and pollution was never simple. It was shifting, uncertain, dictated not by pleasure but by its impact upon the cosmos. If you're fascinated by how taboos shaped civilizations and you're still not subscribed to grim histories, you're missing the very purpose of this channel. Tell us in the comments why you'd willingly stay out of this journey. The Maya world was balanced on a knife's edge, and when blood from rulers and queens was not enough, the gods demanded more. Human sacrifice stood as the ultimate transaction between mortals and the divine. War was not waged for land or wealth alone, but for bodies, living, breathing offerings to be delivered to the gods. Captives were painted blue, the sacred color of sacrifice, stripped of their former glory, and paraded before the masses. Some were forced to play the ritual ball game, the sacred contest reenacting the struggle between the lords of the underworld and the heroes of myth. But this was no game of chance. Their defeat was inevitable, and the ball court became their passageway to death. Dragged up the steep temple steps, their bodies were bent across the stone altar, arms and legs pinned by priests. The fifth priest, the executioner, held aloft the obsidian blade. A weapon as sharp as glass, designed to slice through flesh in a single motion. With a practiced strike, the chest was torn open. Fingers plunged inside. A still-beating heart was ripped free, raised high, steaming in the torchlight. The crowd erupted not in horror, but in ecstasy. Blood streamed down the temple steps, a crimson river feeding the earth itself. The gods, it was believed, consumed that life force to renew the sun, the rain, and the cycle of maize. Children, too, bore the burden of this cosmic hunger. To the rain god Chak, innocence was the most potent gift. Archaeologists have pulled hundreds of small bones from the sacred cenote at Chichen Itza, children hurled into the depths, their final cries swallowed by the black water. To the Maya, their drowning was not cruelty, but purity, a sacrifice untainted, an offering to coax rain from the heavens. Mothers may have watched their children taken, not as victims, but as emissaries to the gods. And sometimes, the rituals did not end with death. The body of a fallen captive could be consumed. Flesh roasted, organs divided, the strength of the enemy absorbed by those who ate. To eat a rival's body was to claim his spirit, to wield his essence as one's own. Cannibalism was not debasement, it was power, a sacred communion of conquest and survival. Sex, too, found its place among these horrors. Certain depictions show sacrificial victims in acts of intercourse with deities as their blood spilled, their seed and their life offered together in a single moment. Fertility and death entwined in one final gesture, as if to remind the living that creation and destruction were but two faces of the same God. This was the final horror, the price of existence paid in bodies, hearts, and souls. But the Maya did not endure this world blindly. They wielded tools to transform pain into transcendence, to step beyond the limits of flesh and glimpse the divine. Their bodies became laboratories of spirit, their rituals a technology of ecstasy. Pain was not the enemy. It was the key. The rituals began with fasting, with isolation, weakening the body until the mind trembled. Then came the intoxicants, psilocybin mushrooms, the flesh of the gods, the venom of toads, a poison that opened doorways, balch, a honeyed drink brewed with the bark of sacred trees, wild tobacco so strong it forced visions upon those who inhaled its smoke. These substances unraveled the boundaries of self, tearing open cracks in consciousness. And when the body was ready, when the soul was already adrift in strange currents, came the pain. The stingray spine dragged across skin, the thorned rope threaded through flesh, the blood flowing as drums thundered and chants rose. For a mind already loosened by hallucinogens, agony became something else entirely. Pain turned to vision. Wounds became portals. The scream was no longer human despair. It was the voice of gods filling the body, the touch of ancestors pressing into the soul. Through this alchemy of blood, smoke, and suffering, rulers proved their divinity. They returned from trance with prophecies, with visions of serpents and ancestors, with commands delivered from beyond. In those moments, kings were not men but conduits, their bodies shattered so the universe might speak. Grim Histories goes further than anyone else to show you the darkest truths of our past. If that doesn't earn your subscription, at least explain in the comments what more we could bleed out of history to convince you. The burden of sacrifice did not rest only on kings and queens. It pressed down on every man, every woman, every child who called the Maya world their own. Ordinary lives were lived under the shadow of the gods, and even the smallest gesture could carry cosmic weight. A farmer did not rise with the dawn only to plant maize, he rose to perform his part in keeping the universe alive. At the edge of his field, he would pierce his finger or earlobe, letting drops of blood fall into the soil. The earth drank his life force, mingling it with the seeds, ensuring that maize would sprout, that his family would not starve. It was not a chore, it was a covenant. In the privacy of homes, bloodletting continued on a smaller scale. A woman, weaving at her loom, might pause to nick her skin, offering a token of her essence to the household shrine. Children grew up learning that their blood, however little, was never meaningless. To give even a few drops was to join in the endless cycle of creation. For women, the body carried an even heavier sacred charge. Menstrual blood was seen as a force of immense power, dangerous, yes, but also divine. It tied them to Ixchel, the moon goddess of fertility and destruction. During these cycles, women were often separated, not because they were unclean, but because their power could overwhelm the rituals of men preparing for war or sacrifice. Their blood was a reminder of the duality of life. It could nourish or destroy, bless or curse, depending on how it was handled. Childbirth itself was the greatest of sacrifices. Every woman who labored did so as if marching into battle. The cries of pain echoed not only through the household, but, in their belief, into the ears of the gods. When a woman died in childbirth, her death was not a tragedy alone, it was honor. She was carried into the afterlife as a fallen warrior, her spirit joining the sun on its perilous journey across the sky. Her blood was not wasted. It was the price paid for the next generation to breathe. Even the home itself was a reflection of the sacred cosmos. A thatched hut of wood and reed was not mere shelter. The hearth at its center was the heart of the world, the place where fire stood as the living sun within the household. Ancestors were often buried beneath the floors, their spirits lingering, watching, guiding. To cook a meal, to light a fire, to weave cloth, all were acts done in communion with the dead, carried out beneath the unseen gaze of gods who demanded constant acknowledgement. Life was never ordinary. It was ritual, every moment soaked in the weight of responsibility. But this devotion had a cost. The machine of sacrifice, once it began, demanded more and more. Kings were judged not on wisdom or governance, but on their ability to bring blood to the altars. To fail in sacrifice was to fail the cosmos itself. And so the cycle grew vicious. Rulers launched war not for conquest, but for captives whose hearts could be torn from their chests. temples demanded more bodies, more blood, more smoke to rise into the heavens. The elite bled themselves publicly, the common people bled themselves privately. The gods were never satisfied. Over time, the demand hollowed the world it was meant to sustain. Crops withered under long droughts, the rains betrayed them, and the forests thinned from endless cutting. Cities turned inward, fighting not for survival of the people, but for survival of their rulers' legitimacy. Wars grew constant, altars piled higher, and blood spilled thicker, until the very society built to preserve the cosmos began to unravel. By the 8th and 9th centuries, the great cities faltered. Stone monuments ceased to record triumphs. The colossal temples fell silent. Populations drained away, leaving behind empty plazas and towering pyramids swallowed by vines. The rituals had promised balance, but what remained was collapse. The covenant with the gods was broken, or perhaps it had never been enough. If you're here, you've already given this story your time, why not also give it your trust? Subscribe to Grim Histories. And if you won't, go ahead and tell the world in the comments why. The blood had scarcely dried on the stones of abandoned temples when new conquerors arrived, carrying not stingray spines or obsidian blades, but iron, muskets, and a new god nailed to a cross. To the Spanish, the world they entered was not a civilization of astronomers and builders, nor even a people living under the crushing burden of their gods. They chose to see only demons. Chroniclers recorded the rituals of the Maya with venom, describing them as depraved, monstrous, evidence that conquest was not only justified, but divinely ordained. To the eyes of Europe, every drop of blood spilled on Maya stone was an invitation for the Catholic sword. One man more than any other left his mark in fire. Bishop Diego de Landa, zealous guardian of the Catholic faith, presided over the infamous auto de fe at Mani in 1562. In a single act of destruction, countless codices, books that held centuries of astronomy, mythology, medicine, and ritual, were thrown into the flames. Carved idols, masks of gods, sacred implements, all were fed to the blaze. De Landa declared that he had eradicated lies and superstition. But what he destroyed was memory itself, a library of humanity's most intricate visions of the cosmos. Only fragments survived, and from those ashes the modern world tries, piece by piece, to reconstruct what was lost. Yet even as the Spanish sought to crush the old ways, the Maya did not let them vanish. Catholicism was imposed with whip and sermon, but beneath the surface, the ancient gods stirred. The wooden cross the Spanish raised was not foreign, it became, in Maya eyes, the great ceiba tree, the world axis connecting heaven, earth, and the underworld. Christ, bleeding on the cross, was not merely the Son of God. He was another sacrificial king, his blood echoing the same covenant the Maya had long honored, the belief that divinity demands the essence of life to sustain the universe. In time, the conquerors believed they had stamped out idolatry. In truth, they had only provided the Maya with new masks for their old gods. Centuries passed, and still the echoes remained. In the highlands of Chiapas, in Guatemala's villages, the rituals did not die. Step into a church in San Juan Camula and the air is heavy with pine needles scattered across the floor, candles flickering in uncountable numbers, and the sharp scent of copal smoke rising to the rafters. There is no priest leading the congregation. Instead, families kneel on the floor, chanting in ancient tongues, whispering prayers not to saints alone, but to the forces their ancestors once bled to appease. Chickens are brought into the sacred space, their necks broken, their blood spilled as offerings to heal the sick or ward off misfortune. The maize fields too carry the echo of old prayers. Farmers plant not merely for food, but with reverence, seeing maize as the very flesh of humanity, as sacred today as it was 1,000 years ago. Healers, called upon to cure the body and the soul, draw from both Catholic symbols and pre-Columbian cosmology. Illness, they say, is not only disease of flesh but loss of spirit, a part of the soul gone astray. To heal is to restore balance, the same balance their ancestors once guarded with bloodletting and sacrifice. Even through centuries of conquest, exploitation, and war, the Maya endured. The 20th century brought new horrors: civil war in Guatemala, genocide, villages razed, communities shattered. Yet survival persisted, not through silence, but through adaptation. The rituals remain, reshaped but unbroken, carried in whispers, in fields of maize, in the smoke of candles rising toward the sky. The gods of stone may have been buried, the codices burned, the pyramids overgrown, but the spirit that bound life to blood, that saw the universe as a fragile covenant, has never been erased. It lingers still, a reminder that even the most violent conquests cannot entirely sever a people from the roots of their own sacred world. The story of the Maya is not a tale sealed in stone. It is a mirror, and when we gaze into it, we do not only see them, we see ourselves. We recoil at the sight of hearts torn from living bodies, of children thrown into black cenotes, of men and women bleeding themselves in public devotion. We condemn it as savage, as barbaric, as a darkness we would never permit in our enlightened age. Yet if we strip away the costumes, the chants, and the temples, how different are we? The Maya believed the universe demanded blood to survive. We believe our world demands sacrifice too, though we hide the altars more carefully. Our wars consume young men and women, their bodies shattered on distant battlefields, their blood spilled not for gods but for flags and nations. Our industries grind down lives in pursuit of profit, exploiting workers until their essence is gone, treating human beings as fuel for the machine of progress. We speak of collateral damage, of acceptable losses, as though suffering were currency to be paid for the survival of systems larger than ourselves. Have we truly left behind ritual violence, or have we only dressed it in new language? We no longer drag captives up pyramids, but we send thousands to die in conflicts justified by power and greed. We no longer burn bark paper soaked in blood, but our earth is stained with the smoke of factories, the lifeblood of the planet itself sacrificed to feed our hunger. The Maya looked to their kings, demanding they cut themselves to keep the sun alive. We look to our leaders and watch as they sacrifice lives, resources, and futures to preserve their own legitimacy. The cycle is not broken, it is transformed. The echoes of the Maya remind us that civilizations are fragile things. They are built on faith, whether in gods or in ideologies, and when that faith demands too much, collapse is never far behind. The Maya sacrificed until their cities fell silent. What, then, do we sacrifice today, and what silence might await us? If you have followed this far into the shadows and still hesitate to subscribe to Grim Histories, then tell us why in the comments. You have already bled your time into this story, now decide whether to walk away or step fully into the covenant we make with the past. The pyramids now stand swallowed by jungle. Their steps are no longer slick with blood, their plazas no longer thunder with chants. But if you close your eyes, if you listen with more than ears, you can still hear it. The faint beat of a drum. The hiss of burning paper. The cry of a priest raising a heart to the sky. The echoes of the Maya are still here, in rituals, in ruins, and in us. The smoke has cleared, the stones are silent, but the question remains, what do we sacrifice today, and who among us will be remembered as the high priests of our own unraveling? The story does not end here. The shadows stretch further, and the past is not done whispering. Stay with Grim Histories, for in the ruins of yesterday lie the horrors of tomorrow.